For decades, the relationship between the U.S. and Canada was just one of those things you could count on. You know, rock solid, a bedrock of global stability. But in the fall of 2025, that bedrock just shattered. Today, we're going to dig into how a single TV ad got blamed for blowing up a $770 billion trade deal, and why the real story is so much deeper. It's about a bruised ego, a failed negotiation, and the collapse of an entire alliance.
So how did this happen? The official story, the one you heard on the news, points to a single 30-second TV ad. But what if that was just a convenient cover story? The truth is, this was really about a deeply bruised ego and a negotiation that was already on life support. That ad wasn't the cause, it was the excuse. Let's pull back the curtain.
All right, so let's start with the official story, the public reason for this whole diplomatic firestorm. The spark that supposedly lit the fuse didn't even come from Canada's capital. It came from the provincial government of Ontario, which, frankly, was in a state of economic desperation.
And things escalated so fast. In the fall of 2025, Ontario was getting hammered by U.S. tariffs. So they get clever. They launched this ad campaign using Ronald Reagan's own words to champion free trade. Well, the Reagan Foundation complained online, and that was all the ammunition President Trump needed. He immediately labeled the ad fake, and then in this dramatic climax, he just pulled the plug on the whole thing.
And the tone was, well, it was intense. The whole tirade peaked with this all-caps declaration. Egregious behavior. Just like that, with a single social media post, the official story was set. Canada cheated, they got caught, and now they were going to be punished. But as you've probably guessed, that was far from the whole truth.
So, what was really going on behind closed doors? That Reagan ad, it wasn't the cause of the collapse. It was just a super convenient excuse for a negotiation that was, for all intents and purposes, already dead in the water. And here's the crucial difference between the public excuse and the private reality. The ad was the scapegoat. The real issue, which White House insiders later confirmed, was that President Trump was just deeply frustrated. Canada was proving to be, quote, very difficult to negotiate with, and we all know that's just code for they weren't willing to just give in.
Now, to understand that frustration, you have to get inside the president's worldview. It's all built on this concept, a zero-sum game. For him, negotiation isn't about finding a win-win. Nope, it's a battlefield. There's a winner and a loser. So if Canadian officials said talks were making progress, in his mind, that could only mean one thing. He had to be losing.
You know what's really interesting, though? The financial markets, which should have gone into a total freefall over this news, they barely even flinched. They saw it and basically just gave a collective yawn. They didn't see a real policy shift. They saw atmospherics. A classic Trump move. They correctly diagnosed it as a tantrum designed to flip the table and bully Canada into submission.
But it gets even more complicated. This whole drama wasn't just about a frustrated negotiator. That Ontario ad didn't just provide a convenient excuse, it landed at a moment of extreme political and personal sensitivity for the president. It basically struck two very raw nerves. Okay, so nerve number one, the timing was for the White House just politically awful. A huge Supreme Court case was about to challenge the legality of his entire tariff policy. Trump even accused Canada of launching the ad to interfere with the court. And nerve number two, and this one is crucial, it touched his personal ego. The ad didn't just criticize protectionism, it used the sainted figure of Ronald Reagan himself to do it.
And this was the core message of the ad. Reagan's actual voice, warning about trade wars and economic collapse, it was like a ghost from the past rebuking the administration's policies. It was a really sophisticated way to weaponize a Republican icon against the sitting Republican president.
And Trump's response just laid the whole ideological battle bare. He didn't just disagree, he went into this stunning historical revisionism, claiming that Reagan, the ultimate icon of free trade, actually loved tariffs. The ad exposed this raw ideological contradiction right at the heart of the party. And for a president obsessed with his image, that was an unforgivable offense.
So all of this, the ad, the ego, the failed talks, it was all just a symptom of a much deeper and maybe irreversible sickness. We're finally at the most profound reason for the collapse, the fundamental breakdown of the U.S. Canada alliance itself.
And I want you to just let this statement sink in for a moment. For the leader of Canada to say that the risk from its closest democratic ally is now similar to the risk from an authoritarian rival like China, that is an absolutely seismic declaration.
It was basically a public announcement that a central assumption of Canadian foreign policy for 75 years was now dead. The U.S. was no longer a predictable rules-based partner.
And this wasn't just talk. It was based on bitter, painful experience. Canada felt totally abandoned by the U.S. during the Two Michaels hostage crisis with China. The lesson they learned was brutal. Loyalty to the Trump administration was a one-way street. So what's the result? Canada is moving on. They're actively re-engineering their place in the world and pivoting to Asia to reduce their dependency on the U.S.
What we're witnessing here is this tragic feedback loop. The president's America First policies, which are designed to force a win, are instead convincing our allies to build brand new systems that bypass the United States entirely. It's an abdication of American leadership, and it's ultimately resulting in a permanent loss of American power and influence. Canada's pivot is just the most painful and striking example yet.
So in the end, this was never about a 30-second ad. It was about a failed negotiation, a bruised ego, and the very public death of an alliance. And that leaves all of us with a really critical question. When a bond as strong as the one between the U.S. and Canada can break, what on earth does that mean for the stability of the rest of the world?